So I apologize. So thank you, Barb. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to talk to us about CRM itself, and I think this is a great segue. Let you guys read that. So we all face that, right? Every time we're working with a company. Would you like an email? Would you like would you like to be added to our mailing list? That sort of thing. But having this data where we can use that to drive our business processes is huge. And so with that, our next speaker, not quite the guy in the suit or the guy on the ground, fortunately, but it's our architect in our practice is Bobby Smith. So Bobby.
So let's see if I get around the 15 seconds. Is my mic on? Yes. Ooh. So I'm Bobby Smith, like David said, thank you. I've been with Covenant for a little over 3 years, and basically what I want to do is I kind of want to talk to you about the process from going from CRM on-prem to CRM online, whether that's you're in 4.0 trying to upgrade all the way to D365, or you're on D365 all the way up to, or D365 on-prem just going to online. Just want to kind of hit some highlights on that. So first off, what I want to do is kind of talk to you and just talk about why some people do it, hit some common hurdles that we regularly see in the industry, talk about some processes for actually migrating over, and then talk about some tools that we have available at our disposal in order to complete the migration. So first off, before I get into that, how many people are actually on Dynamics 365 Online or currently migrating to Dynamics 365 Online? Anybody? I know of a couple people in here. Not many? Should be good then. So when I was originally asked to talk on the process for migrating from on-prem to online, I had a problem kind of coming up with a starting point. I basically had to ask myself, why do people migrate from on-prem to online? So I came up with a couple of different options. Some things that drive people online is cost. It definitely has the potential to be beneficial to some organizations, whether or not that's the staff they no longer have to be able to maintain their on-prem instance, or purchase the additional hardware, software for hosting those servers, or even worry about the networking. When you migrate to Dynamics 365, Microsoft handles all that for you. So you no longer have to have the extra resources and the extra costs to deal with that. So that's one benefit that we see some companies move to. Another one is features. So not just the new features that are coming out, but there's a lot of clients that kind of take advantage of some other features. One of my favorite ones that I think Mike alluded to earlier is the data export services, aka Azure SQL. Allows you to kind of pull your data outside of CRM, put it into Azure so that you can easily report on it if you have existing SQL reports or anything along those lines. Getting the data export services can help with that, as you wouldn't have to convert all your reports over. Another cool thing that we see people kind of looking at is kind of the gamifications. It's a great little application to kind of help build team morale, help with boost productivity, and just brings team spirit. If you never looked at it, it's a fun little add-on. That's pretty great. The relevant search is one that I personally use all the time. Just not too long ago, I had an issue to where I remember the name John. I knew I had to do something with John, but I couldn't remember whether it was a case I was working on or an opportunity I was supposed to follow up on. But with the relevant search, all you do is type in John, or in this case, Contoso, and basically what it'll do is for everything that you have enabled, it'll allow you to, it'll pull up all the relative records that tie to John. So from there, I was able to easily discern, I got a case that I got to go and make sure that I follow up on. So that's another cool feature that people tend to use. Inside views is another one, whether you're looking for existing clients or potential clients, or kind of looking at the competition that's out there. It just helps you kind of keep on track of what's going on. Voice of the customer. This is in my top 3 favorite options, also known as surveys. Whether or not you're doing internal or external surveys, it's just a great way to get information out there and get responses back so that you can kind of deal with that and move forward. But by far, the feature that we see people enjoy the most is essentially your editable grids. It's definitely my favorite. I don't know if anybody else has had this problem, but every now and again I have this issue where I got to go in and update 15, 20 different records. In the old versions, what you'd have to do is you had to individually open up a record, go update it, go to your next one, go update it, and so on and so forth, and continue your done. Well, with the editable grids, you can just all do it from one view and move on with your day. So it's a great feature. Not everybody uses it, but it's definitely a personal favorite. And of course, portals is another thing that we see people more and more kind of gravitating towards and moving towards. So a lot of different options on that side of life. Another reason we see people migrate is basically the supportability and the reliability. So when you're on the cloud, Microsoft guarantees you a 99.99% uptime, which means you'll have very little to no interruptions to your application. They also offer 24/7 support. So if you do have any problems, Microsoft's there for you. They got you around the clock, whether or not it's for your local thing here in St. Louis or your branch over in Hong Kong. Microsoft's there. They're going to be able to help you through it. You don't have any worries about that. And if you happen to have a tier A support, you get up to 1 hour response times. I've used this a couple of different times, and 90% of the time within 20 minutes, I'm on the phone with somebody that's actually physically helping me resolve it, not just on the phone with somebody, yeah, we're working on it, but they're pretty great with that. So it's definitely something that's worth considering. And the thing that's my favorite is when you move to online, you never have to worry about being out of date. Microsoft handles all your upgrades going forward, and they never let you get more than 2 versions behind. But it's definitely a really, really big benefit for moving from on-prem to online. So kind of what I wanted to do is kind of talk about some hurdles that people tend to run into when they migrate from on-prem to online. Some of these hurdles you see in more than just that. Maybe it's a net new application and you're doing that, or just some enhancements. You'll run into those there. But we've got some hurdles that I wanted to kind of highlight and kind of talk about some potential impacts you have with the hurdles. One of the big ones that we see is failure to identify all your systems. This is a problem that we see quite a bit, and essentially, think of this scenario. You're 2 weeks out from go live. You're sending out your notifications, letting everybody know, hey, time to go. Here's what you need to do. Here's what we're going to be expecting. And in 2 weeks, you'll be logging into here, and you'll have your access. A little bit later on, after you send that out, John reaches out to you from the Teradata team saying, hey, this is the first time I've heard of this. What's going on? How am I going to be able to connect to get all this data over here so that I can send it off to all these users over on this side of life? So the failure to kind of identify everything that's kind of working with your system can definitely have some big impacts to your timelines and add some extra cost too. Another thing that ties pretty closely with that is lack of collaboration, whether that's internal collaboration or external collaboration. If you're not communicating very well and keeping up to date, you can definitely have potential gaps in your solution whenever you're migrating over. So it definitely has the potential to impact timelines and then, of course, cost. Scope creep. Everybody knows about scope creep. It's out there. It always has the potential to add significant costs, add to your timelines, and potentially just all around difficult. Everybody loves scope creep. Here's one that we see a little bit as well, and it's the lack of or even late testing. So think of this scenario. You got Kim. She's been with your company for 5 years. She's been in and out of the system every day, using your processes. She's been training people through all that. She knows your system. She knows your data very well. You don't get her in until 2 weeks before you go live. Then she starts raising up all these flags because she's used to seeing it. At a whim, she knows, no, this isn't right, you're a little off, or it's completely off. But she starts raising those flags right there at the very end. So that definitely has the potential to impact your timelines. But in the worst case scenario, let's say you forgot to involve Kim and she's not seeing it until you actually go live. Well, now it's not impacting your timelines, but now you have prod issues once you actually go live. So that has drastic impact on the user experience, but also gets you some additional costs. So that's a problem that we run into every now and again. Data is one that never ever goes away. a lot of people like to think they have clean, good data, but there's always something, whether it's legacy data from the last 2 times you upgraded, or maybe Sarah forgot to clean up the last 3 files she imported, which happened to actually be duplicates from the records she synced from her Outlook. Data is always something that you got to take into consideration. If you don't allow the time to make sure you carefully go through the data, it can always impact your timelines. This one I wanted to call out. It's not as big or as common as some of the other ones we see, but it tends to add a little extra risk if you're not careful, especially in the situation to where you're kind of doing what we call a like for like, where you're really just moving this data from here to here with little to no transformations. So what your data is in the new system should exactly mirror the data in your old systems. So in that scenario, if you have your existing processes like your workflows, your plugins, and things that trigger when an event happens, like your account creates or your opportunity is updated, during that final migration time, this just concatenates onto the amount of time it takes to actually move that data, but it potentially can bring in some extra hurdles just because if you're moving a lot of data quickly, it can cause your servers to run hard and some other things that can be interesting problems. So just wanted to call it out. It's an interesting one we don't see very often, but it's definitely kind of worth calling out. But one we do see fairly regularly is storage costs. CRM is great, you get storage on it, but once you need to start getting the additional storage outside of what's free, it's a little on the costly side. So luckily we do have options on that with the SharePoint storage for attachments, and you got Azure Blob storage, but it's definitely a hurdle that people tend to run into as well. So whenever you're migrating from on-prem to online, we have essentially 2 real paths that we talk about. One I kind of alluded to before, and that's the like for like, or apples for apples. The other path we have is kind of the full-blown upgrade, and that's essentially where you're doing full data transformations, and that can be maybe you have your account that's just too convoluted and you're breaking it up to multiple entities to help the user experience, or maybe you have some stuff out there that just needs to get cleaned up and consolidated, but regardless, it's just a lot of transformations and there's a lot of changes to your existing data model versus the like for like, which is basically moving your existing data virtually as is on the online. They both net get you to the same place in the end. The path's just a little bit different and they take you up to a little bit different areas. So with a like for like, it's not to say that you can't have enhancements or features. You can still, if you're on 4.0 and you're going to online, you can still take advantage of the new features like the business process flows and maybe rewrite the JavaScript and now use business rules. There's nothing that would really hinder or add any extra risk with the like for like with those kind of enhancements. So at Covenant, we really like to use the like for like approach just because it helps with lower risk and the real big benefit is you get your users in there quicker, sooner, faster. So it's a really nice process that we like to go through. So what I wanted to kind of do is kind of highlight at a high level. Both the processes are essentially the same from a very high level. You're still going to need to sit there and make sure that you fully understand what's going on. You get an elaboration so you know the scope of what needs to happen, what you need to do. You're still going to have your ETL process, which is essentially extracting your data, transforming your data, and loading your data. You'll probably have some customizations, whether it's customizing CRM forms or maybe updating some reports or some things like that. And you'll still need to update your endpoints for each one of those. But the difference between the two is essentially how much work is involved at each of the individual levels. So at the elaboration level, whenever you're doing a like for like versus a full-blown upgrade, there's significantly more work involved at the elaboration level, mainly around the documentation and around the test cases and use cases. So think of it like this. You have your account, you're going to break it out, and you're going to now, instead of having everything all in one place, you're going to have it in 2 places. So now you need test cases and use cases and documentation to make sure everybody knows how to use this, but then you also have to make sure the functionality that used to be there still works back on the account. So now you're creating a lot more complications and a lot more risk, if you will. It's not that it can't be done, it's just a lot more risk for the first go out there. Another part is the first part of the ETL process is extract. That's going to be virtually the same whether or not you're doing a full-blown upgrade or like for like. You're still going to have the same amount of data coming out. But the big difference is at the transformation level. And that's really because with a like for like, you're just, here it is here it is there. Whenever you got to take your account and you got to blow it out to multiple different places, or maybe consolidate other things, maybe you converted fields. They used to be text fields or option sets, and now you're taking advantage of something that's maybe a new feature like the multi-selects or things along those lines. It just adds a little bit of extra complication, which again adds a little bit of extra risk. Your load part of the ETL process is going to be virtually the same. You're going to still have about the same amount of data coming back in, just where you put it at and how you put it in there. The other major difference is going to be your customizations and your reworks. So in the like for like, you're still going to get your enhancements. You're still going to be updating your forms, your views. Maybe you're getting some nice dashboards out there, things along those lines. But you're not going to have the same level of effort as you would in a full-blown upgrade just because you're not making as many changes. And you're virtually going to have about the same amount of effort whenever it comes to the updating for your existing reports and integrations, just because you're going to be physically in a new location. So virtually what you have for the like for like versus the full-blown upgrade, like for like has a lot lower risk. It has shorter timelines. You generally can get your users in there quicker, sooner, faster. They're now taking advantages of the features that you put in there, and that can kind of help you in a phase 2 or a phase 3 now that people are starting to use the system. They can kind of see what works for them, what doesn't work for them, maybe what you thought was something they needed, now that they're using it. Oh, actually, now it's solved by a business process flow. So that's another big benefit we like for it. Lower costs. You got a lot less effort going into it, so generally it's got a lower cost. And of course, stepping back to, you got smaller test cases and use cases. But with that, you still get enhancements in the like for like, but generally when you're doing a full-blown upgrade, you generally get more enhancements out of it. So it's not that you don't get any extra benefits from a full upgrade. It's just, it takes a little bit longer to get you there, but you do end up getting a little bit extra out of it. So one thing the last thing I wanted to talk about very briefly is kind of some options we have for actually migrating and moving from on-prem to online. So I have 5 different tools kind of that are readily available and out there for everybody to use. And I want to mention a 6th option, basically third-party tool, something that somebody else has already built. It's very generic. But the 5 primary ones is you have the out-of-the-box import tool. Most people have seen this and used this. Not everybody has, but it's very basic, very common. You just take an Excel file or a CSV file and you just upload it to CRM, and it'll go ahead and take that and put it into your system. So it's real quick. The problem is it's very manual. There's no automation really to it, not without a lot of work, and it doesn't match very well or update extremely well. It's not very deep, if that makes sense. Another one I wanted to call out is the LCS, which is Microsoft's Lifecycle Services. So this one is, I believe, not in GA yet. So not everybody has the ability to access it. I think you have to apply and get approved to get in before you can access it. But it's something that's out there that people can benefit from. So I wanted to call it out to make sure that people were kind of aware of it. Another option we have is the data migration utility. So this is something that kind of comes in with your developers' toolkits. This is a really, really nice application. It'll read from your existing system. It'll pull out and extract all your different data files and whatnot, and it'll store it locally, and then it can then go and push into your new system. It's really nice, really handy. There's still a lot of manual efforts in between each one of the stages, but overall, it's definitely a big benefit. And then if you really need to do heavy lifting, there's custom development. 2 of your big features are Scribe and SSIS. Scribe's a great tool for those that haven't heard of it. It's got a lot of connections, a lot of predefined functionality for migrating from one system to another when communicating with CRM. So that's a great tool, as well as SSIS. So SSIS doesn't have quite as much pre-built functionality, but we found that for roughly the same cost, sometimes even less, you get just as much done a little bit faster in some cases. And of course, you can always do third-party tools. There's a lot of people that's written a lot of different applications out there to help migrate from one system to another. So one thing I wanted to kind of do is kind of give a little high level about what each one of the applications kind of limits and benefits are. So the nice thing is basically any method you go with, they generally have a way to match and find data in your new system. So if you're doing multiple files or even relating information back and forth, they generally have a way to find all that information. Some of them are a little bit more robust, like Scribe and SSIS versus the out-of-the-box import tool. I'll pick on that one for just a minute. It does match on unique fields, but the problem is let's say you're trying to find a user named John Doe. Well, you happen to have 5 users in the system. It doesn't like that, and you have a hard time getting that stuff to import. So it's not that it doesn't have it, it's just kind of limited. One thing that the out-of-the-box import tool does have is it's got a quick turnaround. There's not a lot involved. Just get your files out of your old CRM system, just export a view, and then you can easily import that view into the new system. So it's got a quick turnaround. Same thing with the data migration utility. You just connect it up to your old system, it'll read the data, and you get to start running from there. And then generally third-party tools, they're already finished. So there's usually little to no overhead on those as well. But on the flip side, not all of them move attachments, mainly the out-of-the-box import tool. You don't have a way to import like email attachments. So there's definitely some limitations there. It also doesn't import end-to-end relationships. I don't know anybody that's tried to import end-to-end relationships with the out-of-the-box import tool. It doesn't work very well. So you definitely have to go through other routes if you need to do things like that. But all your routes end up preserving your data. So it even goes down to your unique keys that you had in your old system. So you don't have to worry about losing any kind of data integrity. You can still keep all your old keys any which route you go. But your out-of-the-box import tool, the LCS, and the data migration utility, all 3 of those require you to have an import file of some sort. So there's some sort of manual effort that really has to be involved in those to help those move forward. They're not automatic. It doesn't continue to go. You always have to have the human interaction side of life. The other big thing is if you have a large amount of data, the first 3, your LCS, out-of-the-box import tool, and the data utility, they either weren't designed for or haven't been tested moving large amounts of data. So I'll pick on the out-of-the-box import tool again. The largest file that you can import there at the moment is 32 gigabytes. So if you have 100 gigabytes or even 10 gigabytes of data, 32 megabytes, that's quite a few files. So depending on what you're needing to do kind of directs what kind of path you got to go. That's all I have. Right? Kind of abrupt, sorry. If anybody has any questions, feel free to catch me whenever we hit a break, and we should be good. Thank you.
We do have a moment for a few questions if you've got some.
Yeah, if anybody's got any questions.
We have no interest in going on-premise.
Okay.
I'm sorry, from on-premise to online.
Okay.
But we are on 2011, rollout 18.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, obviously, we need to move forward. Any thoughts? And we can do this privately. We don't have to take everybody's time.
No,
I'm
no.
curious if you based on the tools you provided there, if you had a recommendation.
Yeah, so really the recommendation would really depend on kind of what you have in your system as far as what's going on. So the nice thing about being on rollup 18 is you're at the latest endpoints from that point. So if you were on earlier versions, you know between like rollup 8 and 18, the endpoints kind of got deprecated and now you had to do some changes over there. So the real nice thing is all your custom development that was already out there has already kind of been modified. So really the question is how much do you need to move and how long is your time frames and a couple other things to really describe, to be able to better kind of give you a recommendation. If you want to catch me later, we'll see what we can do to help.
Oh, yeah. Just
right now it's not GA, but you can work with your Microsoft rep and see if you can get nominated for the program. So there's a route to go that way, and that's specifically designed to do that. So it sets up an Azure environment, you move it over, you get to do your in-place upgrades, and when it's done, then you can pull it back to on-prem or move it to online. So that's definitely a great option. So what he's talking about is taking these tools and moving it from one to the other. If you're staying on-prem, you've got the ability to set up servers and do in-place upgrades all the way to that point. I'm not as much of a fan from going from that version, especially if you started off in version 4.0. There's a lot of legacy code that didn't get upgraded, which kind of lingers, and that's part of the reason why we like, using the tool. So depending upon the size of your database, ultimately determines which method we probably recommend on that part. But you've got multiple options, and it all depends upon hardware availability, size of your database, and other options like that. Thank you.
Question, no problem. Anybody else?
All right, thanks, Bobby.
Thank you.
So, at the core of all this, right, we said this is for you guys, okay? And the day is for you, the event is for you, and we want you to get something out of it. So, everybody gets an ERP, right? In Oprah's words. I think this was her car giveaway, right? At the end of the day, this is something that you guys could look forward to. We are a little bit ahead of schedule. The agenda shows us going right into Kim's remarks. But we're a little bit ahead of schedule, and I noticed a couple of folks kind of getting up and leaving, maybe after lunch. We needed to get a break in. As opposed to jumping right into this, are you okay if we take about a 5-minute break right now? We'll do that, not real long. We do have a longer break at 3. We'll keep to that. I want to get to that break. I know you guys may have scheduled some things that window, so I want to keep as close to the schedule as we actually can. And I think the best thing to do is maybe just take a real short break right now, get back in here in about 5 to 10 minutes. We'll get going on the next one, and we'll be right on schedule. Does that work for everybody? Okay, very good. All right, great. Thanks.